The wind howled across the barren field, carrying with it the sharp bite of late autumn. A battered minivan, its paint faded and its windows streaked with the dust of too many highways, crept along a gravel road that seemed to lead nowhere. Inside, Sarah gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened, her eyes fixed on the horizon where a cluster of concrete and rusted metal jutted from the earth like the bones of some long-dead giant. In the back seat, her two children, Maddie, age 9, and Lucas, just 6, sat in silence, their faces pressed to the glass, searching for any sign of the home their mother had promised. Sarah's heart pounded with a mix of dread and hope. She had nothing left to lose. The last shelter had turned them away, the last friend's couch had been reclaimed, and the last of her savings had gone to gas and a few bags of groceries. All she had now was a letter, yellowed and creased, that had arrived out of nowhere 2 weeks ago. It was from a lawyer in a town she'd never heard of, informing her that she was the sole heir to a property left behind by a distant relative she barely remembered. The address was a string of numbers and a county road, and the only description was decommissioned Cold War facility. The lawyer's voice on the phone had been cautious, almost apologetic. "It's not much, Miss Carter, just an old bunker. But it's yours, free and clear." Now, as the minivan rolled to a stop before a rusted chain-link fence, Sarah wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The bunker looked nothing like a home. The entrance was a heavy steel door set into a mound of earth, flanked by crumbling concrete walls and overgrown weeds. A faded sign warned of government property and trespassers, but the lock on the gate had long since rusted away. Sarah stepped out, her boots crunching on gravel, and pulled her coat tighter against the wind. Maddie and Lucas followed, their small hands finding hers as they stared at the bunker with wide, uncertain eyes. "Is this it, Mom?" Maddie whispered, her voice trembling. Sarah forced a smile. "This is it, sweetheart. Our new start." She led them through the gate, her breath visible in the cold air. The steel door groaned as she pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. The air inside was cool and musty, tinged with the scent of old metal and earth. Sarah flicked on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom to reveal concrete walls lined with pipes and faded warning signs. Every step echoed, magnifying the children's nervous giggles and the thud of Sarah's heart. At the bottom of the stairs, a heavy blast door stood ajar. Beyond it, the bunker opened into a series of rooms, bare, echoing, and empty, except for a few battered chairs and a table covered in dust. It was nothing like the homes Sarah had known, but it was shelter. It was theirs. As she explored, Sarah's mind raced with questions. Why had her great-uncle left her this place? What secrets did these walls hold? She ran her hand along the cold concrete, feeling the weight of history pressing in. Somewhere deep within the bunker, a faint draft stirred, carrying with it the promise of something hidden, something that could change everything. Sarah didn't know it yet, but the bunker was more than a relic of the past. Behind its walls, in a room no one had entered for decades, a secret waited, a secret that would test her courage, challenge her trust, and offer a chance at a future she'd never dared to imagine. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time, not so long ago, when Sarah Carter's world was filled with the ordinary chaos of school lunches, soccer practices, and bedtime stories. She'd had a job she loved, a small but cozy apartment, and a sense of certainty that tomorrow would look much like today. But life, she'd learned, had a way of unraveling in slow, relentless threads, until one day you woke up and realized the ground beneath your feet was gone. It started with the layoff. The company had been struggling for months, rumors swirling like autumn leaves, but Sarah had clung to hope. She was good at her job, a reliable office manager who kept things running even when the bosses lost their heads. But when the pink slips came, her name was on the list. Severance was meager, and the job market was flooded with people just like her, hard-working, desperate, and invisible. At first, she tried to shield Maddie and Lucas from the truth. She packed their lunches with a smile, walked them to the bus stop, and spent her days scouring job boards at the library. But as the weeks stretched into months, the bills piled up. The landlord's patience wore thin. The fridge grew emptier. Sarah sold what she could, her grandmother's china, the kids' outgrown clothes, even her wedding ring, a relic from a marriage that had ended quietly years before. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday, taped to the door in bold, impersonal print. 30 days. She read it 3 times before she let herself cry, silent tears in the bathroom, while the kids watched cartoons in the next room. She called every number she could find. Friends, family, social services, but help was always just out of reach. Her parents were gone. Her sister lived 3 states away and barely scraped by herself. And her ex-husband was a ghost, sending the occasional birthday card but little else. They moved into the car first, telling the kids it was an adventure, a camping trip. Maddie was old enough to sense the truth, her eyes searching her mother's face for reassurance. Lucas, still young, was content with stories and snacks, his world shrinking to the back seat and the promise of just one more night. Sarah parked in church lots, behind grocery stores, anywhere they wouldn't be noticed. She learned which gas stations had clean bathrooms, which shelters had the shortest lines, and how to make a dollar stretch until it snapped. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the cold, it was the shame. The way people looked through her, the way her children's laughter grew quieter, the way hope became a memory she could barely recall. She kept a notebook in her purse, scribbling lists of jobs, shelters, and dreams she was afraid to speak aloud. Every morning, she woke before dawn, watching her children sleep, and promised herself she'd find a way out. One night, after a particularly cold rain, Sarah sat in the front seat, her hands wrapped around a cup of gas station coffee, staring at the dashboard. Maddie and Lucas slept in the back, curled together under a pile of blankets. The radio played softly, a song from her childhood, and for a moment she let herself remember the girl she used to be, fearless, full of plans, certain the world would bend to her will. She wondered what that girl would think of her now. It was in that moment, as she watched the rain streak the windshield, that her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, the area code from a place she'd never been. She almost didn't answer, but something in her gut told her to pick up. "Hello? Is this Sarah Carter?" The voice was formal, practiced, but not unkind. "Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Richard Evans. I'm an attorney with Evans & Price, representing the estate of Mr. Harold Carter." "I believe you're his great-niece?" Sarah's mind raced. She remembered Uncle Harold only vaguely. A quiet man who'd come to Thanksgiving once or twice, who sent Christmas cards with crisp $20 bills tucked inside. He'd lived alone, somewhere out west, a relic of another era. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Carter passed away last month. In his will, he named you as the sole beneficiary of his property in Lincoln County. I know this is unexpected, but if you could call my office, we can discuss the details." Sarah hung up, her hands trembling. She stared at the phone, then at her sleeping children, and felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in months, possibility. She called the number the next morning, her voice shaky as she spoke to the lawyer. He explained that the property was a decommissioned Cold War bunker, left to Harold by a friend decades ago. It wasn't much, he warned, but it was paid off, and the taxes were current. If she wanted it, it was hers. The next days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and cautious hope. Sarah scraped together enough for gas, packed what little they had left, and pointed the minivan west. She told the kids they were going on an adventure, that they'd have a place to call their own. Maddie asked if there would be a bed for her, if Lucas could have his own room. Sarah promised she'd do her best. As they drove, Sarah's mind spun with questions. What would they find? Was it even safe? Could she turn a bunker into a home? But beneath the fear was a stubborn thread of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this was the break they needed. The journey was long, the miles ticking by in a blur of highway signs and rest stops. They sang songs, played games, and watched the landscape change from city to countryside, to the lonely stretches of farmland that marked the edge of the world. At night, Sarah lay awake in motel beds, listening to her children breathe, and dared to imagine a future where they belonged somewhere again. By the time they reached the gravel road that led to the bunker, Sarah was exhausted but determined. She gripped the steering wheel, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation. Whatever waited for them beyond that rusted gate, it had to be better than what they'd left behind. And as the bunker loomed into view, stark and silent against the gray sky, Sarah whispered a silent prayer, for strength, for luck, for a chance to start over. She didn't know what secrets the bunker held, or how it would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But as she looked at her children, their faces pressed to the window, she knew she'd do whatever it took to give them a home. Even if it meant facing the ghosts of the past, the darkness of the unknown, and the weight of a legacy she'd never asked for. Sarah sat in the driver's seat of the minivan, the engine ticking as it cooled, her hands resting motionless on her lap. The bunker loomed before her, half swallowed by the earth, its entrance a gaping mouth that seemed to promise both shelter and secrets. The children had fallen silent, their earlier excitement replaced by uncertainty. Maddie clutched her stuffed rabbit, eyes darting between her mother and the strange new world outside. Lucas traced patterns in the fogged window, his small face unreadable. The lawyer's words echoed in Sarah's mind. "It's not much, Miss Carter, just an old bunker. But it's yours, free and clear." She tried to picture what "not much" meant in the context of their lives. Was it better than the backseat of a car? Better than the endless shuffle from shelter to shelter? The constant fear of being turned away? She thought of the nights spent parked behind supermarkets, the mornings spent washing up in gas station bathrooms. The way Maddie had stopped inviting friends to play, the way Lucas had started to stutter when strangers asked where he lived. But this was different. It was a place, a structure, a roof. It was also a relic of a time when people built fortresses underground, afraid of a world that might end in fire. What would it mean to raise her children in a place built for survival, not for living? What would it do to them, to her, to call a bunker home? She stepped out of the van, boots crunching on gravel, and walked to the entrance. The steel door was cold beneath her hand, the paint flaking away to reveal scars of rust. She pushed it open, the hinges shrieking in protest, and peered inside. The air was thick with the scent of old concrete and metal, but it was dry and the walls looked solid. She flicked her flashlight across the space, imagining beds in the corners, shelves for food, a table for homework and meals. It would take work, more work than she'd ever done. But it was possible, maybe. Sarah returned to the van, her mind racing. She thought of the risks, the isolation, the unknown dangers, the possibility that the bunker was uninhabitable. She thought of the children, their need for stability, for friends, for sunlight and laughter. She thought of herself, of the exhaustion that clung to her bones, the hope that flickered and threatened to go out. Was she strong enough to do this? Was she foolish to even try? She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, searching for someone to call, someone to ask for advice. But the list was short, and the hour was late. She was alone as she had been for so long. The decision was hers, and hers alone. Maddie's voice broke the silence. "Mom, are we staying here?" Sarah turned, meeting her daughter's gaze. She saw fear there, but also trust, a trust that Sarah would do what was best, that she would keep them safe. Lucas looked up, his thumb in his mouth, waiting for her answer. Sarah knelt beside them, pulling them close. "I don't know what this place will be like," she said softly. "It's not what I imagined, but it's ours. We can make it work if we try. It won't be easy, but I think we can do it together." Maddie nodded, her grip tightening on the stuffed rabbit. Lucas leaned into his mother's side, comforted by her warmth. Sarah stood, drawing a deep breath. She walked back to the bunker, this time with purpose. She explored every room, making mental lists of what needed fixing, what could be salvaged, what might be possible. She found a small generator in a side room, dusty but intact. There were water tanks, empty but clean. The walls were thick, the doors heavy. It was safe, at least from the world outside. She returned to the van one last time, gathering their few belongings. She carried Maddie's backpack, Lucas's blanket, the bag of groceries, and the battered suitcase that held everything they owned. Together they crossed the threshold, stepping into the unknown. That night, as they huddled together on the floor of the main room, Sarah listened to the wind howl above them and felt, for the first time in months, a fragile sense of hope. The bunker was cold and empty, but it was theirs. It was a chance to build something new, to reclaim a future that had seemed lost. Sarah lay awake long after the children had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling, her mind filled with plans and worries and dreams. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or what secrets the bunker might hold. But she knew this. She had chosen to stay, to fight, to hope, and that, she realized, was the first step toward something better. The first morning in the bunker arrived with a silence so complete it felt unnatural. No birdsong, no distant traffic, just the muffled sound of breathing and the occasional drip of water echoing somewhere deep within the concrete maze. Sarah woke on the thin blanket she'd spread across the cold floor, her back aching, her mind foggy with exhaustion. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she saw the low ceiling, the exposed pipes, and the gray light filtering through the narrow entrance, and it all came rushing back. Maddie and Lucas were still asleep, curled together beneath their shared blanket. Sarah let them rest, knowing how much they needed it. She rose quietly, pulling on her coat, and began to explore the bunker in earnest. The flashlight's beam danced across the walls, revealing faded stenciled warnings: emergency exit, radiation shelter, authorized personnel only. The place was a relic, a time capsule from an era when fear had driven people underground. The main room was larger than she'd realized, with a heavy steel table bolted to the floor and a row of battered metal chairs stacked in a corner. A narrow hallway branched off to the left, leading to a series of smaller rooms, one with rusted bunk beds, another with empty shelves. A third that might have once been a kitchen, judging by the corroded sink and the ancient, unplugged refrigerator. The air was cold and damp, and every surface was coated in a fine layer of dust. Sarah's breath clouded in the chill. She tried the light switches, but nothing happened. The generator she'd found the night before was her only hope for electricity, but she'd need fuel and a miracle to get it running. She checked the water tanks. Empty, as she'd feared. The plumbing was intact, but the pipes groaned when she turned the taps, and no water came. She made a mental list. Fuel, water, blankets, food, light. The essentials for survival. She returned to the main room to find Maddie awake, sitting cross-legged and hugging her knees. "Is it really ours?" Maddie asked, her voice small in the cavernous space. Sarah nodded, forcing a smile. "It's ours. It just needs a little work." Lucas woke next, rubbing his eyes and looking around with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "Where's the bathroom?" he asked. Sarah led them down the hallway, showing them the small, windowless room with a metal toilet and a cracked mirror. It was far from comfortable, but it was private, and for now, that was enough. They spent the day exploring every inch of the bunker. Maddie found a box of old board games in a storage closet, their pieces scattered but mostly intact. Lucas discovered a stack of yellowed comic books, their covers faded, but still colorful. Sarah inventoried the supplies left behind. Canned food long past its expiration date, a first aid kit with brittle bandages, a box of candles, and a few battered flashlights. The harshness of their new world became clear as the hours passed. The cold seeped into their bones, and the darkness pressed in from every corner. The children grew restless, their voices echoing off the concrete walls. Sarah tried to keep their spirits up, turning the exploration into a game, but she could see the worry in Maddie's eyes and the uncertainty in Lucas's questions. As evening fell, Sarah gathered the children in the main room. She lit a candle, its small flame casting flickering shadows on the walls. They ate a simple dinner of crackers and peanut butter, their voices hushed in the vast, empty space. Sarah told them stories of brave explorers and hidden treasures, weaving hope into every word. That night, as they settled into sleep, Sarah lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the bunker. She thought of all the work ahead, the repairs, the cleaning, the search for supplies. She thought of the world above, the life they'd left behind, and the uncertain future that stretched before them. But as she listened to her children's steady breathing, Sarah felt a spark of determination. The bunker was harsh and unwelcoming, but it was a beginning. It was a place to build from, a shelter from the storm. And as she drifted into a restless sleep, she promised herself that she would do whatever it took to make this new world a home. The first week in the bunker was a test of endurance, resourcefulness, and faith. Sarah quickly learned that survival in this underground world was not just about shelter from the elements, but about facing a new set of dangers and doubts that threatened to unravel her fragile hope. The first challenge came with the cold. The bunker, built to withstand nuclear blasts, was also a trap for winter's chill. The concrete walls radiated cold at all hours, and the few blankets they had were no match for the biting air. Sarah tried to insulate the sleeping area with cardboard and old tarps she found in a storage closet, but the warmth never lasted. Maddie developed a cough, and Lucas's hands were always cold to the touch. At night, Sarah lay awake, listening to the children shiver, guilt gnawing at her for bringing them to this place. Food was another constant worry. The canned goods left behind were mostly inedible, their contents spoiled or rusted through. Sarah rationed what little they had brought, stretching meals with crackers and peanut butter, making a game of bunker stew with whatever she could scavenge. She ventured out to the nearest town, a 20-minute drive down winding country roads, to buy groceries with the last of her cash. The small-town grocery store was expensive, and the cashier's eyes lingered on her worn clothes and tired face. Sarah felt the weight of judgment, the silent question of what someone like her was doing in their quiet community. It wasn't long before the locals began to notice the newcomers. The first encounter was with a man named Earl, who drove a battered pickup and wore a sheriff's badge on his jacket. He stopped Sarah as she was loading groceries into the minivan, his tone polite but wary. "Haven't seen you around before. You new to Lincoln County?" Sarah explained about the inheritance, the bunker, and her plans to fix it up. Earl listened, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "A lot of folks around here don't take kindly to strangers poking around old government property. You be careful out there. Some things are better left buried." The warning lingered in Sarah's mind as she drove back to the bunker. She wondered what stories the locals told about the place, what secrets they believed it held. She tried to reassure herself that she had every right to be there, but the sense of being unwelcome grew with each passing day. The next challenge was structural. On the third night, a storm rolled in, battering the land above with wind and rain. Deep in the bunker, the family listened to the distant rumble of thunder, comforted by the thick walls. But as the storm raged, Sarah noticed a slow drip of water seeping through a crack in the ceiling of the main room. By morning, the drip had become a steady trickle, pooling on the floor and soaking their blankets. Sarah spent hours searching for the source, climbing onto a rickety ladder to inspect the ceiling. She found a hairline fracture running the length of the room, water forcing its way through with every gust of wind above. She patched it as best she could with duct tape and plastic sheeting, but the leak persisted. The children's spirits began to falter, their excitement replaced by fear and discomfort. Maddie, always the brave one, tried to help, but Sarah could see the worry in her eyes. "What if the bunker floods, Mom? What if it collapses?" Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, hiding her own fear. "We'll fix it, Maddie, I promise. We just have to keep trying." But the setbacks kept coming. The generator, their only hope for light and heat, sputtered and died on the 5th night. Sarah spent hours poring over the manual, her hands black with grease, but she couldn't get it to start. The darkness became oppressive, the silence broken only by the children's restless sleep and the distant drip of water. The emotional toll was heavy. Lucas began to have nightmares, waking in the night crying for the home they'd lost. Maddie grew quiet, her laughter fading as the days grew colder. Sarah felt the weight of their disappointment, the fear that she had failed them. She tried to stay strong, to keep their spirits up with stories and games, but her own hope was slipping away. One afternoon, as Sarah was hauling water from a nearby creek, a group of local teenagers appeared at the edge of the property. They laughed and jeered, throwing rocks at the bunker's entrance and shouting insults. "Hey, bunker rats! You hiding from the Russians or just too poor for a real house?" Their words stung, and Sarah hurried the children inside, locking the heavy door behind them. That night she lay awake, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The next morning, Sarah found graffiti scrawled across the bunker's entrance. "Go home." The message was clear. She was not welcome here. The sense of isolation deepened, and for the first time, Sarah considered leaving. But where would they go? There was no home to return to, no safety net waiting. The bunker, for all its flaws, was still their only refuge. As the days passed, the challenges mounted. The leak in the ceiling worsened, soaking their bedding and threatening to ruin what little they had left. The generator remained stubbornly silent, and the food supplies dwindled. Sarah's hands were raw from work, her body aching with exhaustion. She felt herself slipping into despair, the hope that had carried her this far flickering dangerously low. But just as she was about to give in, a glimmer of possibility appeared. While searching for tools in a forgotten storage room, Sarah found a locked metal box bolted to the floor. The box was old, its surface covered in dust and grime, but the lock was sturdy. She called Maddie and Lucas to help, and together they searched the bunker for a key. The hunt became a game, a welcome distraction from their troubles. After hours of searching, Lucas found a small brass key taped to the underside of a bunk bed. With trembling hands, Sarah fit the key into the lock and turned. The box creaked open, revealing a stack of yellowed documents, a faded photograph of a man in military uniform, and a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside the wooden box was a note, "For the one who endures. The truth is deeper than you think." Sarah stared at the note, her mind racing. What truth? What secrets had her great-uncle hidden in this place? The discovery reignited her curiosity, her determination to see this through. She didn't know what she would find, or if it would be enough to save them, but for the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. As night fell, Sarah gathered the children and told them about the box, about the note and the promise of something hidden. Maddie's eyes lit up with excitement, and even Lucas managed a small smile. The challenges they faced were real, and the road ahead was uncertain, but the possibility of a secret, of something more, gave them a reason to keep going. What lay hidden in the depths of the bunker? What truth had been buried for decades, waiting for someone desperate enough to find it? As Sarah drifted into a restless sleep, she knew only one thing for certain. They had come too far to turn back now. The answers were out there, somewhere in the darkness, and she was determined to find them, no matter what it took. The discovery of the locked metal box and its cryptic note marked a turning point for Sarah and her children. The hardships of the bunker had not vanished, but now, every shadowed corner and echoing hallway seemed to hold the promise of something more. The note, "For the one who endures." "The truth is deeper than you think," echoed in Sarah's mind, fueling her curiosity and determination. She began to see the bunker not just as a shelter, but as a puzzle waiting to be solved. The next morning, Sarah spread the contents of the box across the steel table in the main room. Maddie and Lucas hovered nearby, their eyes wide with anticipation. There were several yellowed documents, some official-looking with faded government stamps, others handwritten in a spidery script. The photograph of the man in uniform, her great-uncle Harold, she realized, was inscribed on the back. Lincoln County, 1962, for the future. The wooden box, though empty now, had a false bottom that Sarah pried loose, revealing a small, rusted key and a folded map. The map was hand-drawn, showing the layout of the bunker in detail. But there was something odd. A section of the map was marked with a red X, in a place that didn't seem to correspond to any room they had found. Next to the X, in Harold's handwriting, were the words, "Below the generator." Only when the time is right, Sarah's heart pounded. She called Maddie and Lucas over, showing them the map and the key. "I think there's more to this place than we thought," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "We're going to find out what Uncle Harold wanted us to see." They began their search in earnest, starting with the generator room. The generator itself was a hulking relic, its metal casing streaked with oil and dust. Sarah examined the floor, tapping along the concrete with a wrench, listening for a hollow sound. Maddie scoured the walls for hidden panels, while Lucas crawled beneath the workbench, searching for anything out of place. After an hour of searching, Lucas's voice rang out. "Mom, there's something here." He pointed to a section of the floor where the concrete was cracked, the edges uneven. Sarah knelt beside him, running her fingers along the seam. She used a crowbar to pry at the edge, and with a groan a small trapdoor lifted free, revealing a narrow shaft descending into darkness. The air that rose from the shaft was colder, tinged with the scent of earth and old secrets. Sarah shone her flashlight down, revealing a metal ladder bolted to the wall. She hesitated, fear warring with curiosity, but Maddie squeezed her hand. "We can do it, Mom. We're together." One by one they climbed down the ladder, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. At the bottom they found themselves in a small chamber, its walls lined with shelves. Old boxes, sealed tins, and stacks of papers filled the room. In the center stood a battered desk, and on it a thick ledger bound in cracked leather. Sarah opened the ledger, her hands shaking. The first page was dated 1961, and the entries were meticulous. Lists of supplies, names, dates, and cryptic notes about deliveries and visitors. As she read, a pattern emerged. The bunker had been more than a fallout shelter. It had been a hub for something secret, something that involved more than just her great-uncle. Maddie found a stack of letters tied with string, each addressed to HC and signed with initials Sarah didn't recognize. The letters spoke of the project, of keeping the trust, and of ensuring the legacy. One letter, dated 1974, caught Sarah's eye. "If the world above ever forgets, the truth will remain below. Guard it well, for it is worth more than gold." Lucas, meanwhile, discovered a tin box filled with old newspaper clippings. The headlines were dramatic. "Cold War tensions escalate. Secret bunkers built across Midwest. Lincoln County facility rumored to house government secrets." One article from a local paper mentioned a series of mysterious visitors to the area in the late 1960s. Men in dark suits, unmarked trucks, and rumors of gold shipments hidden from prying eyes. The family spent hours poring over the documents, piecing together a story that was both thrilling and unsettling. The bunker, it seemed, had been part of a network of secret facilities built during the height of the Cold War. But unlike most, this one had been privately owned, maintained by a small group of men who believed they were safeguarding something of immense value. As the days passed, Sarah found herself drawn deeper into the mystery. She visited the local library, searching for any mention of her great-uncle or the bunker's history. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Green, remembered Harold Carter as a quiet man who kept to himself. "He was always polite, but he had secrets," she said, lowering her voice. "People said he was involved in something big during the war. After he came back, he built that bunker and hardly ever left. Some folks thought he was hiding from the government. Others thought he was hiding something for them." Sarah pressed for more, but Mrs. Green only shook her head. "All I know is there were nights when strange cars would come and go. And once, after a bad storm, Harold came into town with a black eye and wouldn't say a word about it. He was a good man, but he carried a heavy burden." Back at the bunker, Sarah shared what she'd learned with Maddie and Lucas. The children were fascinated, their fear replaced by excitement. The bunker was no longer just a cold, uncomfortable shelter. It was an adventure, a mystery they could solve together. But the deeper they dug, the more questions arose. What was the project mentioned in the letters? What had been hidden in the bunker? And why had Harold gone to such lengths to protect it? And most importantly, was it still there? One evening, as Sarah was sorting through a box of old keys and tools, she found a small envelope addressed to her by name. The handwriting was unmistakably Harold's. With trembling hands, she opened it and read, "Sarah, if you are reading this, it means you have endured more than most. The world is not always kind, but there is kindness in the world if you look for it. What I have left for you is not just a legacy of survival, but of hope. Trust your instincts. The truth is deeper than you think, and sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight. The words filled Sarah with a sense of purpose. She looked at her children, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the lantern, and knew that whatever secrets the bunker held, they would face them together. The mystery was far from solved, but for the first time since arriving, Sarah felt that they were exactly where they were meant to be, and somewhere, deep beneath the concrete and steel, the truth waited, silent, patient, and ready to change everything. As the days passed and the family's search for answers continued, Sarah realized that the bunker's secrets were not the only thing lurking beneath the surface of their new life. The small town nearby, with its weathered storefronts and watchful eyes, was a world unto itself, one that could be both welcoming and wary, depending on who you were and what you wanted. Sarah's first real encounter with the community came at the local hardware store. She needed supplies, caulk for the leaks, batteries for the flashlights, and a new padlock for the bunker's entrance after the graffiti incident. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, drawing the attention of the man behind the counter. He was in his 60s, with a thick gray beard and a flannel shirt, and he watched her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Morning," he said, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "You must be the Carter girl. Word gets around fast in a place like this." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of his gaze. "I'm Sarah. I just moved into the old bunker on County Road 17, he grunted, then extended a calloused hand. "Name's Bill. My family's been here since before the highway was paved. If you need anything, you come to me. Folks around here can be slow to trust, but we look out for our own. Eventually." Sarah felt a flicker of relief. She explained her situation, careful not to mention the mysterious discoveries, and Bill listened without judgment. He offered advice on fixing the generator and even threw in a few extra supplies, waving off her thanks with a shrug. "Just pay it forward, that's all I ask." Bill wasn't the only one to offer help. At the grocery store, a woman named Denise struck up a conversation as Sarah waited in line. Denise was a single mother herself, raising 2 teenagers and working double shifts at the diner. She invited Sarah and the kids to join her for Sunday lunch, promising a hot meal and a chance for the children to make friends. Maddie and Lucas, starved for normalcy, lit up at the invitation. But not everyone was so welcoming. The sheriff, Earl, continued to keep a close eye on the family, his patrol car often parked just down the road from the bunker. He stopped by one afternoon, his tone polite but edged with suspicion. "Just checking in," he said, glancing past Sarah at the bunker's entrance. "You settling in all right? No trouble?" Sarah assured him they were fine, but Earl's questions grew more pointed. Had she found anything unusual? Had anyone come by asking about the property? He seemed less interested in their well-being and more concerned with what they might uncover. Then there were the teenagers. The graffiti had been just the beginning. One night, Sarah heard the sound of engines revving outside. She peeked through the narrow window and saw a group of trucks circling the property, headlights sweeping across the field. The kids inside shouted taunts, daring each other to get closer to the bunker. Sarah locked the doors and kept the lights off, her heart pounding as she waited for them to leave. The next morning, she found tire tracks in the mud and a broken window in the generator room. It was a message, one she couldn't ignore. Someone didn't want them there, and they were willing to escalate. But for every act of hostility, there was a gesture of kindness. Denise brought over a casserole and a stack of hand-me-down clothes for the kids. Bill stopped by with a toolbox and spent an afternoon helping Sarah patch the roof. Even Mrs. Green, the librarian, offered to watch Maddie and Lucas while Sarah ran errands, her stern demeanor softening as she listened to the children's stories. Sarah learned to navigate the delicate balance of small-town life, accepting help where it was offered, and keeping her guard up where it was needed. She confided in Bill and Denise about the strange documents and the sense that something valuable was hidden in the bunker. Bill's eyes widened, but he only nodded. Old places like that, they hold more than just dust. Be careful who you trust, Sarah. Not everyone wants to see you succeed. The warning proved true when a stranger appeared at the hardware store one afternoon. He was well-dressed, with a city accent and a business card that read Heritage Acquisitions. He introduced himself as Mr. Langley and expressed an interest in historical properties with unique provenance. He asked pointed questions about the bunker, its contents, and whether Sarah had considered selling. Sarah's instincts screamed caution. She deflected his questions, insisting the bunker was just an old family relic. But Mr. Langley's smile never reached his eyes. "If you change your mind, you know where to find me," he said, pressing his card into her hand. That night, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the card burning a hole in her pocket. She looked at her children, at the patched walls and the flickering lantern, and knew that whatever secrets the bunker held, she would have to protect them, not just from the elements, but from those who saw only dollar signs and forgotten history. In the weeks that followed, the lines between friend and foe became clearer. The community's kindness gave Sarah strength, but the threats reminded her that the past was never truly buried. Allies and enemies alike watched and waited, as the mystery of the bunker, and the fortune it might conceal, drew them all closer to a reckoning none could yet imagine. It happened on a gray afternoon, the kind where the sky pressed low and the world felt suspended between rain and silence. Sarah was in the generator room, her hands blackened with grease as she tried, once again, to coax the old machine to life. Maddie and Lucas were nearby, playing with a battered deck of cards on the floor, their laughter echoing faintly through the concrete corridors. The family had settled into a rhythm of sorts, days spent patching leaks, organizing supplies, and poring over the documents they'd found. Yet, beneath the routine, a sense of urgency pulsed. The clues left by Uncle Harold, the warnings from neighbors, and the persistent interest of outsiders all hinted that time was running out. Sarah wiped her hands on a rag and glanced at the map they'd found in the metal box. The red X below the generator still nagged at her. She'd already searched the room for hidden panels and loose tiles, but nothing had given way. Now, as she studied the map again, she noticed something she'd missed before, a faint series of numbers written in the margin. 4297. They were easy to overlook, faded and nearly lost in the creases of the paper. Her mind raced. Was it a code? A combination? She scanned the room, her eyes landing on the old electrical panel mounted on the far wall. The panel had a rusted dial with a 4-digit lock, long since ignored. Heart pounding, Sarah turned the dial, entering the numbers in sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the panel swung open, revealing a tangle of wires and, tucked behind them, a small metal lever. Maddie, Lucas, come here, she called, her voice trembling with excitement. The children scrambled to her side, their eyes wide. What is it, Mom? Maddie asked. Sarah reached in and pulled the lever. Somewhere deep within the bunker, a low rumble echoed, followed by the grinding sound of stone against stone. The floor beneath their feet vibrated, and dust drifted down from the ceiling. They hurried into the main corridor, following the sound to a section of wall that had always seemed oddly out of place, smoother, less worn than the rest. As they watched, a seam appeared in the concrete, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow passageway descending into darkness. The air that rushed out was colder, tinged with the scent of earth and secrets long kept. Sarah shone her flashlight into the passage, her heart pounding. Steps led downward, the walls lined with metal brackets and faded stenciling. At the bottom, another door waited, this one marked with a symbol she recognized from the documents, a triangle enclosing a key. Lucas clung to her hand, his voice barely a whisper. Are we going down there? Sarah knelt beside her children, her voice steady despite the fear fluttering in her chest. We've come this far together. I think this is what Uncle Harold wanted us to find. But we'll go slow and we'll stay together. If anything feels wrong, we turn back, okay? Maddie nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and excitement. Lucas squeezed her hand tighter, but he didn't protest. They descended the steps, each footfall echoing in the confined space. At the bottom, Sarah tried the rusted key they'd found in the wooden box. It fit perfectly, turning with a satisfying click. The door swung open, revealing a room unlike any they'd seen before. It was larger than she expected, the ceiling arched and reinforced with steel beams. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with crates and metal boxes. In the center stood a heavy table, its surface covered in blueprints, ledgers, and a single dust-covered briefcase. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and machine oil. Sarah stepped inside, her children close behind. She ran her fingers over the blueprints, recognizing the layout of the bunker, and, in the margins, notes in Harold's handwriting. The ledgers detailed shipments, dates, and cryptic references to Project Sentinel. The briefcase, when she opened it, revealed stacks of bearer bonds, gold coins, and a sealed envelope addressed to her. She stared at the fortune before her, disbelief warring with awe. The room was a time capsule, untouched for decades, holding not just wealth but the story of a secret kept through generations. Sarah's mind spun with questions. How had Harold come by all this? What was Project Sentinel? And what would she do now that the secret was hers? But as she looked at Maddie and Lucas, their faces alight with wonder, Sarah knew one thing for certain. Their lives had changed forever. The hidden room was real, The fortune was real, and the future, once so uncertain, now shimmered with possibility. The thrill of discovery lingered for days, infusing the bunker with a sense of hope and purpose it had never known. Sarah, Maddie, and Lucas spent hours cataloging the contents of the secret room, marveling at the fortune and the history it represented. For the first time since their journey began, the future felt bright, almost within reach. But as the days passed, the outside world began to intrude, and the shadows that had always lingered at the edges of their new life grew darker and more threatening. It started with a knock at the bunker's entrance, sharp and insistent. Sarah opened the door to find Mr. Langley, the city slicker with the business card, standing on the threshold. He wore a polite smile, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "I was just passing through," he said, "and thought I'd check in. I hope you're settling in well." Sarah's instincts screamed caution. She kept the door half closed, her body blocking his view of the interior. "We're fine, thank you. Just busy fixing things up." Langley's gaze flicked past her, searching for any sign of what lay within. "You know, I've done some research on this property. It's quite unique. If you ever decide it's too much to handle, my company would be happy to make you an offer. In fact, I could have a contract drawn up by tomorrow." Sarah shook her head, her voice firm. "We're not interested." Langley's smile faded. "You might want to reconsider places like this. They attract attention, sometimes the wrong kind. I'd hate to see you or your children get hurt." The threat was thinly veiled, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She closed the door, bolting it behind her, and tried to shake off the encounter. But the sense of unease lingered, growing with each passing day. That night, as the family slept, a crash echoed through the bunker. Sarah jolted awake, heart pounding. She grabbed her flashlight and hurried to the generator room, where she found the window shattered, glass glittering on the floor. The generator itself had been tampered with, wires yanked loose and parts scattered. Without it, they had no power, no heat, and no way to keep the food from spoiling. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but Sarah forced herself to think. She gathered the children, bundling them in blankets, and assessed the damage. The generator was beyond her ability to repair. She would need help, and quickly. She drove into town at first light, seeking out Bill at the hardware store. He listened to her story, his face growing grim. "You're not the first to have trouble with Langley and his kind," he said. "They want that bunker, and they'll do whatever it takes to get it. But you're not alone, Sarah. I'll help you fix the generator. And I'll keep an eye out." Relief mingled with fear as Sarah returned to the bunker. Bill arrived an hour later, toolbox in hand, and together they worked to repair the damage. But the sense of safety was gone, replaced by a constant vigilance. Every sound outside, every shadow at the edge of the property, set Sarah's nerves on edge. The next blow came from within. Denise, the friend who had welcomed Sarah and her children, arrived one afternoon with a troubled look. "I heard something at the diner," she said quietly. "Langley's been asking questions. He's offering money to anyone who can tell him what you've found." Someone's been talking. Sarah's heart sank. She realized that the secret was out, and the small circle of trust she'd built was beginning to fray. She gathered Maddie and Lucas, warning them not to speak to anyone about the hidden room or the fortune. But the damage was done. The sense of community that had once buoyed her now felt fragile, threatened by greed and suspicion. Then, disaster struck. While Sarah was outside gathering firewood, Maddie and Lucas played in the main corridor. A sudden violent tremor shook the bunker, sending dust and debris raining from the ceiling. Sarah rushed inside to find a section of the wall had collapsed, blocking the entrance to the secret room. Maddie was coughing, her face streaked with dust, while Lucas clung to her, eyes wide with fear. Sarah's hands shook as she checked them for injuries. They were shaken but unharmed. But the secret room, their hope, their future, was now sealed behind tons of rubble. The fortune, the documents, everything they had discovered was trapped, perhaps lost forever. Despair settled over the family like a shroud. Sarah sat on the cold floor, her children huddled beside her, and wept for the first time since arriving. All the work, all the hope, seemed to have crumbled with that wall. The darkness pressed in, and for a moment, Sarah wondered if she had the strength to go on. But as the hours passed, something shifted. Maddie took her mother's hand, her voice steady. "We can't give up, Mom. We found it once. We can find a way back." Lucas nodded, his small face determined. "We're together. That's what matters." Their words rekindled a spark in Sarah's heart. The bunker had tested them before, and they had endured. She wiped her tears, hugged her children close, and promised herself that no matter how dark the hour, she would not let them be defeated. The secret room was still there, waiting, and so was hope. The days that followed the collapse were some of the hardest Sarah had ever known. The secret room, once a symbol of hope and possibility, was now entombed behind a wall of concrete and debris. The family's spirits flagged, and even the children's optimism began to waver. Yet, in the quiet hours of the night, Sarah found herself returning to Uncle Harold's words. The truth is deeper than you think. She clung to that message, refusing to let despair take root. Bill, true to his word, returned with tools and determination. He brought a friend, Mr. Alvarez, a retired contractor with a gentle manner and a knack for solving problems. Together they assessed the damage. The collapse, while severe, had not destroyed the structural integrity of the bunker. With patience and effort, it might be possible to clear a path, if they could find the will to try. Sarah, Maddie, and Lucas pitched in, hauling away smaller chunks of debris, sweeping dust, and sorting through the rubble for anything salvageable. The work was exhausting, but it gave them purpose. Denise brought hot meals and words of encouragement, and even Mrs. Green from the library stopped by with a stack of old Cold War history books, hoping they might offer clues or comfort. It was Lucas, ever curious, who made the breakthrough. While poking around the edge of the collapse, he noticed a faint draft coming from a crack near the floor. "Mom, there's air coming through here," he called. Sarah knelt beside him, feeling the cool breeze. Hope flickered. If air could get through, maybe they could too. Bill and Mr. Alvarez examined the spot and agreed it was worth a try. Over the next 2 days, they worked tirelessly, chiseling away at the concrete, widening the crack inch by inch. The process was slow, but with every bit of progress, the family's hope grew. Finally, on the third evening, the last chunk of debris gave way, revealing a narrow opening just large enough for Sarah to squeeze through. She hesitated only a moment before crawling inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with dust, but as she pulled herself into the secret room, her breath caught. Everything was just as they had left it, untouched, preserved by the sealed environment. The crates, the ledgers, the briefcase of bonds and gold. All lay waiting, but there was more. In the far corner, half hidden behind a stack of crates, Sarah found a metal safe bolted to the floor. The safe was old, its dial worn smooth by decades of use. She remembered the numbers from the map, 4297, and her hands trembled as she spun the dial. The lock clicked open, and inside, she found a bundle of documents, a velvet pouch, and a sealed envelope addressed to the one who endures. Sarah opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the neat, careful handwriting. "If you are reading this, you have proven yourself worthy of the trust placed in our family." The contents of this room are not only a fortune, but a responsibility. During the Cold War, this bunker was used to safeguard assets for a network of families who believed in preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. Gold, bonds, and rare artifacts were hidden here, meant to be used only if the world above fell apart. But the greatest treasure is not the wealth, but the knowledge. Records of secret negotiations, evidence of peace efforts, and the names of those who risked everything to prevent disaster. Guard them well. Use them wisely. And remember, true wealth is measured not in gold, but in the lives you touch. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she read. She realized that the fortune was more than money. It was a legacy of hope, of people who had believed in a better future even in the darkest times. She opened the velvet pouch and gasped. Inside were rare coins, some dating back centuries, and a small, intricately carved key. The documents included original treaties, letters between diplomats, and a journal kept by Harold himself, chronicling the secret history of the bunker and the network it had served. Sarah called for Maddie and Lucas, who crawled through the opening, their eyes wide with wonder. Together they explored the room, marveling at the gold bars stamped with foreign emblems, the stacks of bearer bonds, and the crates filled with priceless artifacts, paintings, sculptures, and even a violin wrapped in oilcloth. Each item told a story, a piece of history preserved against the chaos of the world above. As they pored over Harold's journal, the family learned of the sacrifices made by those who had built and maintained the bunker. There were stories of secret meetings, coded messages, and daring escapes. Harold had been entrusted with the care of the bunker, not because of his wealth, but because of his integrity and courage. He had kept the secret for decades, waiting for someone who would value the truth as much as the treasure. The revelation changed everything. The family's struggles, their journey through hardship and fear, had led them to a place where the past and future converged. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility, but also a sense of purpose she had never known. She knew that the fortune could change their lives, provide a home, security, and opportunities for Maddie and Lucas that she had only dreamed of. But she also understood that the true gift was the chance to honor the legacy of those who had come before. Word of the discovery spread quickly. Bill and Denise, sworn to secrecy, helped Sarah make plans to secure the room and protect its contents. Mr. Alvarez offered to reinforce the entrance, ensuring that only those Sarah trusted could gain access. Mrs. Green, with her love of history, volunteered to help catalog the artifacts and research their origins, but Sarah was careful. She remembered Langley's threats and the greed that had already crept into the community. She contacted a lawyer, one recommended by Bill, to help her navigate the legal complexities of the inheritance. Together they began the process of documenting the find, securing the assets, and planning for the future. As the family stood in the secret room, surrounded by the wealth and history of generations, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had endured the darkest hour, faced betrayal and danger, and emerged stronger for it. The bunker, once a symbol of fear and isolation, had become a sanctuary, a place where hope was not just preserved, but reborn. Maddie hugged her mother, her eyes shining. "We did it, Mom. We really did." Lucas grinned, holding up a gold coin. "Does this mean we can stay here forever?" Sarah smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It means we have choices, sweetheart. It means we can build the life we always dreamed of, and help others too." The revelation was more than a fortune. It was a new beginning, a promise that even in the darkest places, light could be found. And as Sarah looked at her children, she knew that the true treasure was not what they had uncovered, but the journey that had brought them together, and the future that now stretched before them, bright, boundless, and full of hope. The days after the discovery felt like waking up in a new world. The bunker, once a cold and forbidding shelter, now seemed to hum with possibility. Sarah moved through its corridors with a sense of purpose, her steps lighter, her heart unburdened by the constant fear that had shadowed her since the day they lost their home. Maddie and Lucas, too, were changed. Their laughter returned, echoing through the concrete halls as they played games among the crates and artifacts, their imaginations running wild with stories of spies, secret missions, and hidden treasure. But with the fortune came decisions, ones that weighed heavily on Sarah's mind. The gold, bonds, and priceless artifacts could buy them a new life, but they also carried a legacy of secrecy and responsibility. The documents and journals revealed not just the value of what was hidden, but the intent behind it, to safeguard hope, to protect knowledge, and to help others in times of need. Sarah knew she could not simply sell everything and disappear. The story of the bunker and the people who had trusted her great-uncle deserved to be honored. The first transformation was practical. With the help of her lawyer, Sarah established a trust to secure the assets and ensure that Maddie and Lucas would always have a home. She used a portion of the funds to repair and modernize the bunker, installing proper heating, plumbing, and electricity. The once drab rooms became warm and inviting, filled with light and color. She created bedrooms for the children, a kitchen where they could cook real meals, and a study where she could work and keep the records safe. But Sarah's vision extended beyond her own family. Inspired by the stories in Harold's journal, she reached out to local charities and shelters, offering anonymous donations to help families facing the same hardships she had endured. She funded scholarships for children in the community, supported the local library, and worked with Bill and Denise to create a food pantry for those in need. The bunker's legacy of hope was no longer a secret. It became a force for good, rippling outward to touch lives far beyond its walls. The transformation was also personal. Sarah found herself growing in confidence, her voice stronger when she spoke at town meetings or advocated for others. She became a fixture in the community, not as the outsider who lived in the old bunker, but as a neighbor, a friend, and a leader. Maddie thrived at her new school, making friends and excelling in her classes. Lucas, once shy and withdrawn, blossomed into a curious, adventurous boy, eager to explore the world around him. Yet, even as their lives improved, Sarah never forgot the lessons of the past. She kept the secret room secure, sharing its story only with those she trusted completely. She continued to study the documents and artifacts, working with historians and archivists to preserve the knowledge for future generations. The bunker became a place of learning, a living museum where the past and present met, and where the values of courage, resilience, and compassion were passed on. One evening, as the family sat together in their newly renovated home, Sarah looked at her children and felt a deep sense of peace. They had come so far, from the edge of despair to a place of safety and hope. The journey had been hard, marked by loss and fear, but it had also revealed strengths they never knew they possessed. The wealth they had found was not just in gold or artifacts, but in the love they shared, the community they had built, and the future they could now shape. Maddie snuggled close, her voice soft. "Do you think Uncle Harold knew we'd find all this?" Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I think he hoped we would. And I think he trusted us to do the right thing." Lucas grinned, holding up a drawing he'd made of the bunker as a castle. "We're like the guardians now, right, Mom?" Sarah hugged them both, her heart full. "Yes, baby. We're the guardians. And we'll make sure this place is always a home. For us, and for anyone who needs it." The transformation was complete, but the journey was far from over. The family had found not just a fortune, but a purpose. And as they looked to the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger, wiser, and forever changed by the secrets they had uncovered and the hope they had restored. As the seasons changed and the world outside the bunker thawed into spring, Sarah's choices began to ripple outward, shaping not only her family's future but the very fabric of the community that had once eyed her with suspicion. The transformation of the bunker from a symbol of fear and secrecy into a beacon of hope became a story that spread quietly at first, then with growing momentum, as more people learned of the kindness and generosity that flowed from its hidden depths. Sarah's decision to use the fortune for good did not go unnoticed. The food pantry she helped establish with Bill and Denise became a lifeline for struggling families, its shelves always stocked and its doors always open. The scholarships she funded sent local children to college, some the first in their families to ever dream of such a thing. The library, once threatened with closure, flourished with new books, computers, and after-school programs, all made possible by anonymous donations that everyone soon guessed came from the woman in the bunker. But the impact was more than financial. Sarah's story, her resilience, her refusal to give up, her willingness to share what she had found, became a quiet inspiration. People who had once kept their distance now stopped by with casseroles, tools, or simply to say thank you. Maddie and Lucas were welcomed into the fold, their laughter and energy breathing new life into the town's school and playgrounds. The family that had once been homeless and alone was now at the heart of a community, their journey a testament to the power of hope and the strength found in helping others. Sarah never sought recognition. She kept the details of the bunker's secret room closely guarded, sharing its history only with those she trusted and with the historians who helped her preserve its legacy. The artifacts and documents were carefully cataloged, some donated to museums, others kept safe for future generations. The story of the Cold War bunker and the network of ordinary people who had risked everything to safeguard hope became a chapter in the town's history, one that would be told and retold for years to come. Yet, for all the good that came from the discovery, Sarah knew that the true legacy was not in the gold or the artifacts, but in the choices she made every day. She taught Maddie and Lucas that wealth was a tool, not a goal, that kindness was a currency more valuable than any coin, and that the greatest treasures were the bonds they built with others. The bunker, once a place of hiding, was now a place of gathering, a home not just for her family, but for anyone in need of shelter, comfort, or a second chance. As word of the family's journey spread beyond the town, people from neighboring communities began to visit, drawn by curiosity and the hope of finding inspiration for their own lives. Some came seeking help, others simply to see the place where a single act of courage had changed so many lives. Sarah welcomed them all, her door always open, her story always shared with humility and gratitude. And so, the legacy of the bunker grew, not as a monument to the past, but as a living promise for the future. Sarah's choices had created a ripple effect, touching lives she would never know, inspiring acts of kindness she would never witness. The family's journey from homelessness to hope became a beacon for anyone who had ever felt lost, alone, or afraid to dream. As the sun set over the fields and the lights of the bunker glowed warmly in the dusk, Sarah stood at the entrance, Maddie and Lucas at her side. She looked out at the world, her heart full of gratitude and wonder at how far they had come. She knew there would be challenges ahead, there always were, but she also knew that together they could face anything. And to anyone watching, anyone listening, anyone wondering if hope was still possible, Sarah's story offered a simple, powerful call to action. Don't give up. The world is full of hidden doors and second chances. Sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the darkest places, and sometimes the choice to open a door, no matter how heavy, can change everything. If you've been moved by this story, don't let it end here. Reach out, help someone in need, or take a chance on your own hidden potential. The next chapter of hope could begin with you. As spring melted into summer and the fields around the bunker bloomed with wildflowers, Sarah often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her family to this unlikely sanctuary. The bunker, once a symbol of desperation and survival, had become a place of new beginnings, a crossroads where the past and future met. Yet, even as life settled into a hopeful rhythm, the sense of mystery that had first drawn them into the depths of the earth never truly faded. There were still questions that lingered, secrets hinted at in Harold's journals, and the coded letters tucked away in the safe. Some documents referenced other bunkers scattered across the country, each with its own guardian and its own hidden story. Maps with cryptic markings, names Sarah didn't recognize, and mentions of the network suggested that the Carter family's legacy was only one thread in a much larger tapestry. What had become of the other keepers? What treasures or truths might still be waiting, buried beneath forgotten fields or locked behind rusted doors? Maddie, ever the dreamer, would sometimes sit at the kitchen table, poring over the old maps and tracing routes with her finger. "Do you think there are other families like us, Mom?" she'd ask, her eyes bright with curiosity. Maybe they need help too. Maybe we could find them. Lucas, too, was captivated by the idea of adventure. He'd fashioned a makeshift explorer's kit from odds and ends found in the bunker, always ready for the next discovery. "What if there's another secret room?" he'd whisper before bed. "Or a message hidden in the walls?" Sarah encouraged their curiosity, knowing that the spirit of exploration and hope was the true inheritance Harold had left them. She began to correspond with historians and archivists, sharing what she could about the network and seeking clues about the other bunkers. Each letter, each conversation opened new doors, some literal, some figurative, inviting the family to imagine a future filled with purpose and possibility. And so, as the days grew longer and the world outside beckoned, Sarah and her children found themselves standing at the threshold of a new adventure. The bunker had given them safety, but it had also given them a mission: to seek out the forgotten, to protect the vulnerable, and to keep the flame of hope alive for those still searching in the dark. Their story was far from over. There were mysteries yet to solve, friendships yet to forge, and lives yet to touch. Perhaps somewhere out there, another family was waiting for a letter, a key or a sign that they, too, could find sanctuary and purpose in the most unexpected of places. If you followed this journey and felt the pull of curiosity, don't let the story end here. There are always more doors to open, more secrets to uncover, and more lives to change. Join us for the next chapter, because every ending is just the beginning of another adventure. Subscribe. Stay curious, and remember, sometimes the greatest journeys start with a single step into the unknown. The next mystery awaits.